You're listening to Big Blend Radio with Nancy and Lisa. We're the mother-daughter team and publishers of BigBlendMagazines.com. And joining us next is Ronald J. Henderson. He's the funeral director of the Freddie Young Funeral Home. It's part of the Santa Rosa Mortuary Group in Northern California. Santa Rosa, it's up there in the beautiful Redwood country. I love this area. You can find out more if you go to SRM, as in Mary, EL.com. Ronald, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thanks for having me. Thank you. I'm doing well, and I'm hungry. I was listening listening to the last part of that lady before me there, and it's becoming dinner time.
I know. So what kind of steak do you want, or pizza, should I ask?
Actually, about almost 2 years ago, I took a cure, and I do very little meat. So I had some cardiac issues, and it was time to make the change and lose a ton of weight. So changed my lifestyle, changed my eating style, and, I'm feeling fine. Never felt bad, but at least I feel better, So.
Well, no. And we are, Nancy and I travel around a lot, and when we travel, we eat what's kind of put in front of us, unless it's fish, because we're allergic to it. And really allergic to it. And at home, we're pretty much vegetarian and vegan almost.
Right.
And so,
am I every day.
Yeah, so portobello, mushrooms, and things like that seem to, kind of tide us over when we want that texture of a steak.
Right. I hear you. Every now and then I'll slip, but I haven't had a hamburger in probably 6 months, So.
Oh, yeah. Good for you. Good for you. Hey.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. No, really. You got to take care of your life. And I know this is one of those subjects people don't want to hear about, right? Nobody wants to talk about funerals or passing, but it's kind of like doing a will, too, isn't it, when you start to think about that?
Yeah, it is. And, we are my generation, which is, a little over 60 now, tend to want a plan. And we talk about trust. We talk about living wills. We get pushed to advance directives down our throats from, all of the hospitals. Every time you go to the doctor, do you have a hospital? Do you have an advance directive, and so on and so forth. But no one ever brings up, okay, what's the next step? In order for all those things to take in, come into play, estate planning stuff, you have to have an estate. And you don't have an estate until somebody dies, because otherwise it's just a trust and people are going about their lives. And now you try to get attorneys to say, okay, maybe you've gone this far, you admit you need to plan, you admit there's going to be a final event, maybe you should start thinking a little bit about it. And in my career, I've only had probably 2 or 3 attorneys send somebody to me to literally sit down, make their funeral arrangements. Some of them choose to prepay, and so on. So it is, it's still a kind of a taboo subject. Nobody, wants to admit they're going. And the one thing I learned very young was the death rate is 100%. Nobody's getting out of here.
Is it they just still want to acknowledge the subject, even though we all know it's going to happen, right? We all know. Right. But is it, let everybody else deal with it later? Or is it just like is there some kind of, if I go in and talk about it, it will happen? Well, it's going to happen. But, that, like, you put it out to the universe kind of thing? Or is it just being, day-to-day life and we only deal with what's really in front of us?
Well, I think that's true. No one wants to talk about it, and yet I do have, most of the time, elderly couples will come and sit down and say, Ron, we want to take care of everything. We don't want to leave a mess to our kids. We want you to, we want to be prepared. And I said, you've done the hardest part. The hardest part is walking in that door or making that phone call. After that, you'll realize most funeral directors are pretty good people and, pretty nice people that are willing to help you. I mean, that's what they're trained to do. And, it's an honor, it's a privilege, and it's always been that way for me that, when somebody says, I need help, you just go help them. And so telling them, you've done the hardest part, and you come in, and they go, wow, this is a whole lot friendlier and a whole lot easier than I thought it was going to be. But we have such a mobile society, it's really kind of an astute thing to do, to have some things written down. I say put it on file with a funeral director. Of course, I'm biased. I'm a funeral director. But at least have some things written down where your kids know where it is, what you would like to see done. Don't exclude them from the process. And the article I gave you early on for posting, alludes to that. Get them involved in the process. They don't want to talk about it. The children will not want to talk about it, or they will say, well, whatever you want to do, Mom and Dad.
That's
that's fine.
Well, and you know what? It's really true. And by the way, everybody, the article's up on CreativeCelebrationsMagazine.com. It's right on the homepage right now if you want to go check it out. And I think, it's interesting putting it on Creative Celebrations Magazine. It is a celebration of life, though. It's another transformation. And I kind of think sometimes there was, we started changing the terminology at some point because it is a transformation. And I think a lot of people, have different religious beliefs. They have, I remember Nancy's best friend not wanting, any religion in it, and then suddenly it was injected later, and all this kind of stuff happens. But where does that fit with a funeral home? Because do you go is it better to kind of put it in your will? Where do you start? Let me just start with that, because where do you start? Just thinking about it, go, wait a minute. And we've all, I think, heard of horror stories of, wait a minute, Grandma didn't have money, we don't have money, and she got took out with the carpet police who take the bodies away. We've heard that on shows. No.
Sure you do.
It's totally true. I'm not trying to be weird. It's true.
And that is that's a very true statement. Fortunately, their funeral directors are very tuned in to doing this with no planning. I mean, probably 80 to 85% of my arrangements are no planning. All they do is, she told me she wanted to be buried. She told me she wanted to be cremated. Where? Where did she want to be buried? Who did, cremated? What's going to happen with the cremated remains? So where you start, quite honestly, is you open the subject, and I encourage people to talk it over at home. And you'll see in that article that I allude to that. Do some talking about it at home. Have a glass of wine. Open up the conversation. Laugh about it.
Wine is a good point.
Get it open. Start talking. Once you do that, that's the hardest part. Then it gets to be really easy, because when you come to a funeral director, he's going to sit down, or she's going to sit down with you and say, okay, how can I help you? My job is not to purvey on people. My job is to make what they want to do happen, one way or another.
Like a wedding.
As long as it's legal and moral, we're going to do it,
Isn't it like a wedding, though, in a weird way? It's a wedding.
It's still kind
of happening.
Oh, that's funny. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
no.
That's funny you should say that. A wedding is one of your hugest celebrations in life. And quite frankly, if you sit down and you say, okay, what's involved in the funeral, what's involved in the wedding? And I've used this in talking to groups for the last 20 years. I plan a wedding, but I do it in 3 or 4 days. I have music, I have ceremony, I have a place, I have cars, I have food, I have ritual, I have ceremony. We have soloists, we have caterers. We do those things. But I do it in 3 or 4 days. Your typical wedding will take 6 months to a year and a half to plan.
And then
we asked that question. Yeah.
Are there other issues involved on that? And so,
exactly. Whether you're going to have, are you going to have a religious ceremony? Are you going to have a celebrant? A celebrant is a person who's just trained to do ceremonies or to do celebrations that you tailor. He sits down and meets with you and tailors the things. What do you want said about your mom or your dad or your sister or your brother, and so on? Or what do you want said about yourself? If you're doing this on a prearrangement, you find out about those things. What are you going to have in this service? Most people will say, and I've heard it so many times, "Oh, I don't care. I'm not going to be there."
Yeah.
Just cremate me and throw me out on the, take me out in the ocean and drop me in. Well, that's just fine. And for you it won't matter, because you will not be there. And it's not cold. It's not cruel. It is just a real simple fact.
Mm-hmm.
And making those remarks all of a sudden leaves everybody else out because you've just decided for you, but you're not dealing with your loss. Your wife is, your children are, your grandchildren are.
Wow.
And you have to think about those people because it's very easy for you to say, well, I'm not going to be there. I don't care if they have a party. Ladies, God bless you. God love the women because they all say, I don't want to be looked at. You are afraid of how you're going to look. God love you, but that's the truth. You are going to be afraid of how you're going to look. And I always tell ladies, and I laugh, and I tell them that same situation, and I say, but remember, you won't matter to you, and I'll probably make you look better.
Yes. Whoa.
So you will find that lipstick I needed.
I want to ask
yes, I will find that color, and it will look great.
Cool.
And
color coding.
Yeah,
exactly. I want to ask you this because
I will ask your children to bring it. And do it.
See, but that's it. Yeah.
I want to ask you this because my best friend at her funeral, she told me exactly what she wanted. She made her own poster board of her life, and she struggled with brain cancer for a long time.
That's awful.
And so it was a process, and it was difficult. It was difficult.
It's brutal.
All the way around.
I think it always
for everybody. Mm-hmm. But she had asked certain things of the funeral home, and I was aware of those. And at the funeral, it didn't happen the way she had asked. But then I also realized she was struggling with brain cancer, and so when you have that, maybe things don't, what I was told may not be what somebody else was told. I get that. But what happens for you as a funeral director if a person has already come and said, here's my money, this is what I want, and then the family, and there's always two sides to a family.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What happens when the family interferes, just like they do in a wedding? We want this, and she's now passed. What happens there?
Yeah. Well,
I know that's a horrible question, but I just
No. It's a very legitimate question because you just alluded to it. There are other family members involved now. They weren't involved at the time she was doing the planning. Okay, so she called us out to the house, and we chatted and wrote it all down right by the bedside, and she gave us a check, and she contracted. We put the money in an insurance policy because there are rules governing that money, particularly in California. But all states have rules about the money prepay.
And this was in California.
Yeah. So when you prepay, you're kind of bound by contract as to do what what the deceased wanted. However, funeral directors are problem solvers most of the time, and we get in between people that aren't getting along. And most of the time, we're pretty lucky to solve all their problems and meet everybody's needs. Of course, you have to be responsible to the deceased and what they, in your case, she had wanted. However, there's most of the time ways to get other input and still meet their needs. And you just have to be careful. A certain amount of pragmatism comes into it. Well, I'm sorry, that's not what she wanted. This is what she told us. We have notes. She signed the authorization, and this is what was contracted for. However, have you given some thought to memorials or using pictures instead of viewings and visitations? Memorials and pictures. Maybe, your friend didn't want that. Maybe she did. I don't know what the situation was, and it's kind of immaterial. But the point is, a good funeral director will find ways to help both sides because the people that he's serving and taking care of that deceased for are going to be, future customers, if you will. And so he's going to want to solve their needs, too, with appropriate suggestions that might help meet their need. And most of the time, they wind up giving a little. The funeral director gives a little, and it gets sorted out. That's one of the reasons in my article I stated, don't leave people out. Don't cast it in stone before you talk about it, because you're going to ask them to do something that they can't do or that you didn't do for your parents when you showed your children. You know, when you took care of your mother and father, now you have showed your children how we take care of people, how we take care of our family. And you did this, and now you don't want any of that. You want to be essentially disposed of and not have anything, and yet you didn't do it for your children, for your mother and father.
Here's the
so
thing.
You have to be sensitive to it, you know.
She did the worst of the worst. She wanted no reference to God or religion at all, which basically it's a hard call because there was so many people of different beliefs.
Right.
And even the person administering the memorial and the burial and everything, it was just a hard call. And I know her, I knew her, and I still know her very well. And I'm like, man, what a joke you played on everybody. She just set it up, not really as a joke, it's her true belief.
Right.
But it just upset everybody.
Ronald, I want to ask this. Do you think that maybe if she had dealt with this beforehand, I mean, it's
before
really
she
different.
got sick.
Right, and I think this is the thing. But at this day and age, it's getting hard because we're having younger deaths now from cancer and things like that. We're having younger people, I think. I don't know. You tell me. You're going to know that part better than I do. But it seems that, you know, things are happening, yet at the same time we're also living longer. So do you think we should just start, when we start thinking about wills, we need to start thinking about this right at that same time so that we can, and we could always update, like if we change religions part way, or, you know, we change, you know, we had money, then we lost money, or whatever it is,
right,
that we can change this, couldn't we?
Well, yes. Like I said, if there is not a contract, it's an information-only file. So you have got all the information, you got their wants and needs, and the last thing I tell people, this is yours. It's about you. It's for your family. It's about you. You need to have some latitude in giving them input. And again, the communication part is a really big part. I don't want them to have to deal with it. Well, you know, just because you're not of a particular practicing faith doesn't mean you're not spiritual. Doesn't mean you don't believe.
Right.
And there are other ways to handle, don't mention God, don't mention, you know, life after death or any of that. And there are ways to have memorials and memories and talk about that person and have people give testimonies as to how that person affected their lives or how they remember her or what they cherish about her. Stories, communicate, talking. A funeral, strictly speaking, is just the community sharing the grief.
Right.
Getting people to grieve. That's what the funeral is supposed to do. They don't grieve when they come to see me. Most of the time they're in shock. And on a prearrangement basis, to do it on a prearrangement basis, I mean, really you can have, I'd like that, I'd really like that song by Frank Sinatra, or I'd like this, da-da-da-da-da. You just take notes and you start writing things down. But, again, communicate. Talk to people. Tell people what you want. Tell your family, hey, I really like this, but it's going to be up to you guys because I'll be gone.
Well, I think that this is an important part because when someone is passed, there's everybody reacts in a different way, and maybe the person that is supposed to handle it all in the family totally loses it.
Right.
And there's absolutely you can't blame them.
No,
that's
not at all.
And that's the thing, and that's where here comes drama, and drama after drama, and it can just go into this spiral, and like a domino effect. And I'm trying to say that it's like, people kind of take control of your own thing as much as you can, because it's not fair to those living that are sitting there going, okay, I don't know what she really wanted, or he or she, or, she said this, but did she really mean that? And, it becomes, I think going through someone passing very close to you is very difficult.
Oh, yeah.
And
they're
then,
mostly shocked there. I mean, quite honestly, for the first couple of weeks, it's shock. The impact of the separation and the loss doesn't hit you until, and I tell most of my families that I don't I don't worry about you for about 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And then after 2 weeks is when I start to get a little concerned, where maybe if I'm in a small town, so I run into families all over town, and ask how they're doing, how's it going, or I hear from their pastor or from a friend they're not doing too well, and so on. And, the shock of the initial death, can be devastating. And and no talking about it, no pre-planning. It's not the cure-all. It definitely isn't. But it is a step. It is something that, at some point in time, hey, we bought a couple graves today. Oh, good. What for? You're going to have a garden? Or no. And we bought graves because we would like to be here, Okay, well, that's fair. Do you want now you start the conversation. Do you want to be buried? Do you want to be cremated?
Well, and I wanted to ask you on that, because I've heard some things about, like, we're running out of space for graves, and more people are going more to cremation. Uh-oh, is that a whole other article? Is that not?
That's a whole other, dear, I'll give you a real quick fact, and I've done the math. Okay. If 6 billion people died today, and that's roughly the population of the Earth is around 7 billion, what they tell us anyways. If they all died today, they could be buried in the panhandle of Oklahoma, which is about 5,400 square miles.
Wow.
I actually looked it up because I had a man write me a letter, and with all these doomsday predictions of, the water's going to run out, and the greenhouse gas is going to do this, and this is going to happen, and this, and then all those 9 billion people, where are they going to be buried? Well, quite honestly, they can all be buried in the panhandle of Oklahoma, about 5,000 square miles.
No.
You can do 3,000 people per acre.
You know what?
Do
That's
the math,
really...
Yeah. Wow. See, but
now, in certain metropolitan areas, in certain metropolitan areas, excuse me for interrupting, but in certain metropolitan areas, their space is a problem. You get around New York City with the number of burials they've had in years and years and years, and it can be very, there are cemeteries that are closed. There are cemeteries that aren't burying anymore. It's the national cemeteries, because we've had, so many veterans now that are in their 70s and 80s are choosing national cemeteries for various reasons, but a lot of it is cost, because they're free for veterans and their wives. They, those national cemeteries have filled up, and so now we have new cemeteries that have opened that are, 500 and 600 acres instead of 100 acres, and they're outside of major metropolitan areas, so they have a lot of room, and that coupled with cremation and not taking as much space in cremated remains, space is not an issue. When I was growing up, starting the funeral business, I saw a statement, and it was by the National Funeral Directors Association, which is a great resource. They said, if everybody in America died today, they could all be buried in the space 1/4 the size of the state of Rhode Island. And at that time, there was 240 million people in the United States. They could all be buried in 1/4 the size of Rhode Island at 3,000 people per acre.
Wow.
So you just kind of have to do the math, cancel the zeros, put down 6 billion, cancel the zeros, and it'll get you the number of acres and acres in a mile and so on.
Ronald, it's really fascinating. I think you've got some great light for people to look at. Like, wait a minute, let's take a look at this, because, and I think even the cremation versus the burial. Now, I had no idea you were going to come back with that at all. So I'm glad I asked that question. Again, everyone, you can learn more about the Fred Young Funeral Home, which is where Ronald is the funeral director, but it's part of the Santa Rosa Mortuary Group in Northern California. Now, who wouldn't want to be buried amongst the redwoods? That's what I want to say, Ronald. Seriously, it's a beautiful area.
It's a gorgeous area.
Go to srmel.com for more information. And thank you so much for joining us. And I hope you come back on.
Thank you. I enjoyed it, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, really good information for people, and a good reminder that we can't let things slide. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Take good care.
You too.
Bye.
Everybody, thank you for joining us, all our guests and experts and all our listeners. It's been a great show today. Definitely a Big Blend variety show. We're going to be back on Wednesday, October 10th at 3 p.m. Pacific Time, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. We've got rants, raves, and rock and rolls happening with Mike Dunmeyer, the Executive Director of Ocean Champions. Mia Vermillion is a blues singer, guitarist, and recording artist will be joining us. Shannon Deering, the author of The Gathering, Book 1 of the Leah Fale Well, it's Leah Falls. She's going to get me in trouble. I'm not saying it right. Book one of the Leah Falls Chronicles. And Lucy Levinson, the lead singer of the LA-based rock band Evo Love, will be joining us. And, of course, David Bowers, the David Bully Bowers, as we call him, will be joining us as co-host. Don't forget you can visit us at BigBlendMagazines.com to keep up with everything. Also, follow us on Facebook at Big Blend Magazine and on Twitter at Big Blend Mag. Thanks, everybody, for joining us, and just have a rockin' rest of the day. Thanks.